the cameras flashed, the crowd froze, and just like that, Hollywood had a new obsession. Well, actually not Hollywood this time.
Yeah, definitely not Hollywood.
Right. Picture the scene. It's New York City, the Bronx specifically. Because on a cold Saturday morning, February 21st, 2026, the rhythm of an entire city literally skipped a beat.
A legendary trombone went completely silent.
Exactly. Willie Colón, the original bad boy of salsa, the guy who essentially revolutionized the genre and defined the Nuyorican identity, died at age 75.
It's a massive loss.
It is. He was a rebel, a visionary, and a massive provocateur. We're going from the gritty streets of the 1960s Bronx all the way into the political corridors of power and finally to a hospital bed. Today, we're unpacking the headline, Why No One Could Stop Willie Colón.
Welcome to StarScope Report. I'm Jamie. Join us as we uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and the wild stories behind the fame.
And I'm Jordan. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we are doing a deep dive into the stories that actually shape pop culture. So today is a tribute, sure, but it's also a full investigation into his life, his tragic physical decline, and his incredibly polarizing final years.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who literally changed the physics of how Latin music sounded. But before we get to those glory days, we have to talk about the breaking news.
Right. So as TMZ and Variety are reporting today, Willie Colón passed away this morning due to respiratory failure. He was surrounded by his wife, Julia Cullen Craig, and his 4 sons.
Willie Jr., Diego, Miguel, and Antonio.
Exactly. And the family issued a statement asking for privacy, but celebrating the, quote, gift of his music. Now, it sounds peaceful on paper, but if you look closer at the medical reports, he was hospitalized on the 18th in a delicate state. The real story of his decline doesn't start this morning.
It goes back way further.
Much further. It actually goes back 5 years. To understand why a 75-year-old musician succumbed to respiratory failure, we have to rewind to April 20th, 2021, the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
The RV accident. I remember seeing the headlines, but it kind of faded from the news cycle pretty fast.
It faded for the public, but it was absolutely catastrophic for him physically. This was a severe motorhome accident. Willie and his wife were pulled from the wreckage, and he was airlifted to a level 1 trauma center in Virginia.
And the injuries were intense, right?
Very. Severe head trauma, a concussion, 16 staples to the scalp. But the real killer, the silent issue in the long run, was a fracture of the C1 cervical vertebra.
The C1, that's right at the top of the spine, isn't it?
It is. It's called the Atlas bone. Like the Greek Titan, it literally holds up your skull. But here's the critical physiological detail. The C1 is located right where the brainstem transitions into the spinal cord. Injuries there are notoriously dangerous because they can severely impact the phrenic nerve.
Okay, for those of us who skipped med school, what exactly does the phrenic nerve do?
It's the primary motor nerve for your diaphragm. It tells your lungs to expand and contract.
Oh, wow.
Now, think about who we are talking about. This isn't a guitarist where you can maybe adapt your finger technique. This is a trombone player.
His entire career, his whole art form depends entirely on lung power.
Precisely. For a wind musician, damaging the diaphragm is essentially a career-ending injury. It destroys your embouchure support. You need massive core strength and internal pressure to make a trombone roar the way he did.
So this chronic impairment from the accident basically made him susceptible to the respiratory failure that finally took him.
That's the medical analysis we're seeing. He fought for 5 years to recover. He was a fighter to the very end, but the physiology just couldn't hold up anymore.
It's just such a tragic irony. I mean, this is El Malo, the bad boy. He survived the meanest streets of the Bronx in the 60s. He survived the crazy drug-fueled highs and lows of the salsa explosion, only to be taken down by a traffic accident in North Carolina.
It's a heavy way to start the show, I know. But to understand what we've lost, we have to go back to when he first picked up a horn. Because he wasn't always a legend. He started as a kid in the South Bronx in 1950, born William Anthony Colón Roman.
And this is really where that Nuyorican identity starts to form. We hear that term a lot, but for Colón, it wasn't just a marketing label, it was his everyday reality.
Absolutely. Puerto Rican heritage mixed with New York street survival. And his grandmother, Antonia, seems to be the crucial figure here. She was the matriarch. She instilled this deep Puerto Rican pride in him, singing rural Hebrew songs.
Hebrew being the country folk music of the Puerto Rican mountains, right?
It's acoustic, storytelling, very humble.
Which is fascinating because the Bronx is about as far from the mountains of Puerto Rico as you can possibly get. It's all concrete and noise.
Exactly, but that penchant is what made his music work. Now here's a fun fact I dug up. Willie didn't actually start on the trombone.
Wait, really?
He started on the trumpet.
I can't even picture him playing anything else. The trombone is his entire signature.
Well, he switched because of the sound quality. He was listening to players like Barry Rogers, and he decided he loved that the trombone sounded, quote, ugly.
Ugly. That is usually not the goal for a musician.
In this context, ugly meant raw, nasty. The trumpet was pretty and melodic. It was the instrument of those polished ballroom bands of the 50s. The trombone, though, it could roar. It was low frequency. It sounded exactly like the Bronx streets felt, noisy, brash, imposing.
He wasn't trying to be polite. He was trying to be heard over the sirens.
Exactly. And that raw attitude got him signed to Fania Records at age 15.
That absolutely blows my mind. At 15, I was barely figuring out high school geometry, and he's signing a record deal with what was basically the Motown of Latin music.
And by 17, he records his first album, El Malo. This is where his marketing genius kicks in. People think gangster rap invented the outlaw musician persona in the 90s. Willie Colón was doing it in 1967.
Ah, the album covers are iconic. He's posing as a mobster, an outlaw. He had actual wanted posters on the covers. He fully leaned into being the bad boy of the neighborhood.
But the image wouldn't have mattered if the music didn't back it up. Which brings us to the partnership that changed everything. The duo. Willie Colón and Hector Lavoe.
They were the undisputed kings of New York.
They really had distinct roles. Lavoe was the sonio, the lead singer, who specializes in improvising lyrics on the fly. He had the soul. But Colón was the visionary arranger. He was the architect of the New York sound.
How would you define that New York sound for someone listening who maybe thinks all salsa sounds exactly the same?
Well, before them, a lot of Latin music was very polite. Full horn sections, trumpets leading the melody. Colón and Lavoe stripped all the trumpets away. They built a front line of just 2 trombones.
Just 2 trombones. That sounds incredibly heavy.
It was. It gave the music this aggressive bottom end. It left a huge sonic space in the upper register for the percussion to just crack, and for Lavoe's voice to soar over it. It was a mix of jazz, rock, and gritty urban salsa.
Plus, he brought in those rural sounds his grandmother loved, like using the cuatro guitar on the album Asalto Navideño, taking country island music and making it cool in the urban jungle.
Right. They were creating the biggest hits in Latin music history. But Willie was about to ditch that gangster image for something even more dangerous: politics. And later in the episode, we're going to talk about the shocking twist in his legacy that absolutely nobody saw coming.
If you're loving these Hollywood twists and music history deep dives, make sure you're subscribed. We've got even crazier stories ahead, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.
So we hit the late 70s. Lavoe is struggling heavily with addiction, their partnership is straining, and Willie pivots. He teams up with Panamanian singer Ruben Blades.
Another massive pivot. Ruben Blades was a lawyer, a very different vibe from Lavoe.
A complete 180. And in 1978, they dropped the album Siembra.
Which is arguably the best-selling salsa album of all time.
It's the stacked pepper of salsa. It completely changed the rules. This wasn't just dance music anymore. This was salsa consciente, conscious salsa.
They were telling complex narrative stories. I mean, look at a track like Pedro Navaja.
A total classic. It's a 7-minute salsa retelling of Mac the Knife, set in the barrio. It's basically a film noir script set to music.
And Plastico. It starts with that fake disco beat, which was a huge risk in 1978, and morphs into this incredible critique of materialism and superficiality.
And then there's Tiburon. This track is crucial for understanding the later twists in his life. Tiburon the Shark was a massive anti-imperialist anthem. It explicitly criticized U.S. intervention in Latin America. The shark was the USA, circling the smaller fish of the Caribbean.
Which is incredibly ironic given where he ended up politically.
Oh, extremely ironic. But in the 70s and 80s, he was the voice of the people. He was producing for Celia Cruz. He reunited with Lavoe to produce the track El Cantante. Even his solo stuff pushed huge boundaries.
We have to talk about El Gran Barón. That song blows my mind every time I hear it.
In the macho culture of 1980s salsa, that song was totally revolutionary. It's a tragic story about a father rejecting his child, Simon, who transitions and becomes Simonette. It deals directly with trans identity and the AIDS crisis.
At a time when governments were barely even acknowledging that AIDS existed?
Exactly. He was shining a light on AIDS and trans rights when almost no one else in mainstream music dared to touch it. He forced conversations in living rooms across Latin America.
So let's look at the scorecard here. You have a guy singing about revolution, justice, trans rights, anti-imperialism.
Sounds like the ultimate progressive icon, right?
You would definitely think so. But wait till you hear what came next. Because if you look at the internet today, in the wake of his death, The reaction is incredibly complicated.
That's putting it mildly. The internet, specifically Latin American Twitter and Reddit, really turned on him in his final years. The man who wrote those anti-imperialist songs became a staunch conservative.
We're talking full Meiji, right?
We are. Now, just to be clear, for everyone listening, when we dive into these political shifts and the Reddit threads surrounding them, we are simply reporting impartially on the timeline, his public statements, and the online reaction. We aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoint here, left or right. We are just looking at the facts of his life.
Right, we're just mapping out the timeline of how the fan base reacted to him.
Exactly. So the timeline is fascinating. He actually campaigned for Bill Clinton in '92. But over time, he shifted right. By 2017, he publicly announced he voted for Donald Trump. He became a fierce, highly vocal critic of the Venezuelan left, specifically Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro.
He even wrote a campaign song for the Venezuelan opposition, didn't he? Mentira Fresca.
He did. Fresh lies. And he wasn't just tweeting about law and order. He actually joined law enforcement.
That part feels like a movie script to me. The guy who posed as a wanted criminal on his album covers, the bad boy of the Bronx, was literally sworn in as a deputy sheriff in Westchester County in 2014.
He literally became the law. And a lot of his fans really struggled with it. If you go down the rabbit hole of these Reddit discussions today, fans are trying to figure out how to reconcile the artist they loved with his later persona.
There are accusations that his social media just became this unfiltered stream of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, reports of alleged homophobia and misogyny online, which is so jarring to fans who grew up listening to El Gran Verón.
It's the ultimate separate the art from the artist dilemma.
It really is. And it had real-world consequences. His relationship with Ruben, Blaze Music's greatest duo, ended in lawsuits over money, breach of contract accusations, and a very bitter ideological divide. They went from making history to practically being enemies.
It's sad, you know, you want your heroes to stay exactly how you picture them. But people are incredibly complex. Do you think he fundamentally changed, or did the world just change around him?
That is the million-dollar question. Willie Colón was never simple. He was a pure contrarian.
Yeah.
Think about it. He rebelled against the pretty sound of the trumpet to play the nasty trombone. He rebelled against traditional salsa lyrics to write about street crime.
Right.
So maybe, in his later years, his conservatism was just another form of rebellion.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. He rebelled against the norms of salsa, and then he rebelled against the expectations of his own liberal fan base. He just absolutely refused to be what people demanded he be.
Exactly. He was El Malo. He did whatever he wanted, and he didn't care if it made him unpopular.
And now that he's gone, we're left looking at the entire picture. And the numbers are just undeniable. 30 million records sold, 40 productions, a Lifetime Achievement Grammy. He was the bridge between Puerto Rico and New York. He dragged the trombone to the front of the stage and refused to move.
He really did. And it leaves us with an important question to mull over. In the end, does an artist's politics erase their art? Or does the music stand entirely alone? Can you listen to Pedro Navaja today and still feel that same magic, knowing how much the man behind it changed?
That is something for you to decide the next time you hear that trombone roar.
It certainly is.
You've been listening to StarScope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.